What is up, guys? This is Matt Cox back with another episode of the Saucetown Investor, and we are bringing you another guest this week. Another deal junkie is joining us because it went so well with Mike Nuss last week. I'm joined by a very special guest. This guy's 7 years my junior, but I've probably learned more real estate from this guy than anybody. He's 28 years old. He started off house hacking, built that into 160 units as of today. Was not a smooth ride to get there, though, which we'll talk about that a little bit. And he also runs a company called Vesta Solutions, which we'll talk about, that helps people build wealth through real estate. On top of that, he's a big investor, but he's also my agent along with Sabrina. I am joined by Trevor Howard. Trevor, what's up, man?
Thanks for having me, dude. I just want to say I've taught you way more than Mike Nuss, hopefully. I'm way cooler than that
guy. Mike he knows too much econ stuff. My eyes gloss over. I can't keep up. If you listened last week, I did my best to stay with him. But yeah, man, thanks for joining us today. Where are you joining us from?
Salem, downtown Salem.
Okay, and I forget, you grew up in Salem, right?
I grew up, Kaiser, so same thing.
Kaiser,
grew up in Kaiser, then went to private small schools, and then Oregon State, did that whole thing.
Cool, man. So let's bust into it. So yes, you mentioned you went to Oregon State. Let's go kind of back to the beginning of your real estate journey, I guess. I know out of school, you did not immediately go into real estate. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing straight out of college.
Yeah, so you've heard of FIRE, right? Financial Independence, Retire Early?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, all right. So I was all about that. I had read books on it, heard about it. I was like, this is cool. You can not work for the rest of your life and go do whatever you want. And I just wanted to go play basketball every day and do nothing. So I was just came across the idea. I was like, this is a really interesting concept. Can I do this? My whole plan was to put all my money in the S&P 500. I would have like $1 million in there in like 10 years, and I'd live off like 40 grand a year comfortably, which I thought was a lot of money at that time because I was 22. And I'd track every single penny I ever spent from like partway through college to now. And I was spending 10 to 12 grand a year to live. And so I was like investing 90% of my income or whatever it was into the S&P. Just every dollar was basically going in there. And I was like, okay, plan really sucks because I'm not actually going to have that much money in the end. And I have to spend the next 10 years doing this shitty job I don't really want to do. So just kept listening to like FIRE podcasts and all that stuff, and eventually heard of the idea of real estate, came across Bigger Pockets, just listened to every single episode while I was at work. Like I was listening like 12 hours a day of books and podcasts, which is way too much. No one needs to do that. Came across the idea of house hacking, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I can live. And the whole idea on the front end was I can just live cheaper even actually by buying this property. So I wasn't even thinking like financial independence through the property, like in owning real estate. I was just like, I can live cheaper if I own this property and rent it out by the room. So that was kind of like how I got into it. And then eventually I got out of the stock market completely, but I was like S&P 500. I was like, this is the way. This is 7% returns. This is awesome.
Yeah, and you can get rich through the stock market. Lots of people do, but to your point, it's a much slower path. It's an entirely passive path. You don't have to do anything. There's no work involved, but you certainly can get there. But you sped the process up a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk to our listeners.
Let me throw a note in there too on that. So like biggest piece of advice I give for people my age, that was a really good decision to max out my 401k at that time. If I was going to stay in like the W-2 workforce, you do that like 2 or 3 years in a row. Like you set your whole retirement in those first like 2 or 3 years because it compounds over time. So most people just wait too long and get a 7% return when you're starting at age 50. Like you're just screwed. You can't do it. But I had 40-year outlook or 30-year outlook. So it's like, okay, let me put most amount of money in here on the front end. I was just looking at compounding interest calculator. And I was like, cool. I set my whole retirement after 2 years of just maxing this out. So like, I sold it all after that. But like, if I was investing at that time, like again, and I was 22, I would do that same thing probably.
Yeah, the compounding stuff is powerful. You always see that graphic with Warren Buffett. You know, he's 94 now, and I think he made 95. He's worth 150 billion or something. I think he made 95% of it after he was 85. So if you
Mhm.
you start that stuff early, it piles up for sure, but not as quickly as real estate does. At least if you're doing real estate at scale, that is. Um, Take us into, well, first off, for our listeners, real quick, just what is a house hack, and then what did yours look like? Where was it? How many housemates did you have? Take us through that.
Mhm. Yeah, so house hacking is just using an owner-occupied loan and turning residential real estate into investment real estate. So you can go put whatever 0 to 5% down, acquire a $400 to $1 million asset with very little money. You can live in it for a bit and then turn it to a rental property. So you could buy a duplex, triplex, fourplex, live in one unit, rent out the rest. What I did was I bought a house and rented out all the bedrooms because that just cut my living expenses down to the most possible. And that's easy to do at 22, but you have a wife and kids, like you're not really going to do that. You can go buy a house, live it for a bit, move to the next. But it's all these different ways to use these owner occupied loans to just pick up rental properties. So like if you are into real estate, easiest way to do it, just put 3 to 5% down, buy whatever, live it for a bit, move to the next, and you can repeat that every single year. And you can literally build like a $20 million portfolio with very little money.
Yeah, I know people that have done it, and it's the quickest way to get four doors right off the bat if you go straight into that fourplex, and then on top of that, you're kind of learning the business, learning how to underwrite a deal, learning how to manage tenants. It really is, in my opinion, kind of the quickest. I didn't do it myself. I sort of did. I rented a room in my condo. But it's I would say it's the quickest way to kind of go to hyperspeed in real
Yeah.
estate and learn a lot and build some equity and some skills and some doors pretty quickly without
The
needing
most
a whole lot of money.
attainable for a beginner. Like our goal for like anyone can buy 3 properties. Like no matter who you are, you can get 3 properties under your belt and you can change your whole life. Like it's like whether you're not able to do it right now, you'll be able to do so within like a 2 year time frame even. So like anyone can do it and you will change your whole life just through doing 3 of these things. Likely once you get 3, you're gonna be like, I want way more of these. But like our goal for everyone coming through our program is like you can do 3. Like anyone can do this. Because I was making 50 grand when I started out as an engineer. Like that's not that much money.
Yeah, and we'll get more into what you're doing with Vesta and how you're helping people uh, purchase real estate. Um, But let's go back to your story a little bit. So you get the first house hack, which was a single family home, and then you become, and that was when you were 22, right? You bought that one.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so then by 25, you become a millionaire. What did your portfolio look like at that point? What were you doing?
Yeah. I'll walk you through it. So bought that first deal, learned about real estate. Was like, holy shit, I live here for free and I make money. It clicked. I was like, I need to do this as many times as possible. So 10 months later, I bought basically the same exact house with another bedroom. Didn't have any more friends to live with though. So just rented it all out to strangers, learned about doing that. I don't need to dive that deep into it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this as many times as possible. But at that point, I was living off like 10 grand, living for free also, while making 20 to 30 grand in cash flow from just 2 properties. So I was like, I'm going to quit my job and invest full time in real estate. If I did that, then I realized, holy shit, I can't qualify for any loans anymore. My whole plan is ruined. So I was trying to figure out what to do. And at that time, I was still listening to all these podcasts, reading all these books, was learning how you can do deals in other ways. So I started partnering with friends at that point, and like they had access to these loans. They were asking me about it. So then I went and bought another fourplex not that long after. And I was like, I was told in this book that I could buy like a 16 to 20 unit. So let me like figure out the next step and try to do so. So then I went and wrote like 100 handwritten letters to all these apartment owners of these specific ones. No clue how to buy it or anything. Start mailing them, being like, this is who I am. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm interested in your property here. I want to buy it. Please give me a call. And then, X% call you back, you talk to them or whatever. And I try to go to lunch with them. And I was just curious too, like, how did you buy this? Cause I was like, if you tell me how you did it, maybe I can take those steps. And then I was also just going into every bank possible and asking them like, how do I get a commercial loan? And like, I knew all the lingo because I had read all the books, but I looked like I was like 12 years old in person. So most of the people would just like kick me out of the meeting. Um, but I kept buying properties that way. Eventually, like met Gabe, who I'm a partner with today, through a banker. He's like, hey, go have lunch with this guy. He'll share all this info. Gabe sat there with me for like 3 hours, answered all my questions. I was going on, dude, to find these apartments. I was going on apartments.com and like being like, okay, here's where you find the apartments from. And then I would go look up their address from there. He's like, you can just call title and say, I want a list of all the 10 to 20 units with the owners and they'll give it to you. I was like, oh, so much easier. I've been spending hours like trying to do this. And that's how I got the mailing list. Bought a 16 unit that way. I just put it under contract, had no idea how I was going to finance it. And I just started pitching it to people that want to partner with me.
Hold on, Trevor, one sec. Okay,
Yeah.
when you bought the 16 unit, how many doors were you at before that? You had your house hack, you bought a fourplex, and then where were you at that point?
I think I bought another fourplex possibly, and that's one I lost a lot of money on. I think that 16 unit might have been the next one I did actually, and I bought some more small plexes after it. But I think the 16 might have been the next one.
Okay. So how did you? Because I had a similar story with I think we kind of talked about this on Deal Junkies. I had a similar story with Gabe where I went in there. He met with me because we shared. I didn't know him really at the time, but we shared family friends, and he gave me the whole talk. And Gabe is always like, just buy as many. You need to buy bigger deals. You need to buy more deals. You need to lever. How many doors can you get? And at that point, I had a handful of doors, probably similar to where you were at. And it was kind of like, okay, cool. Like this guy's telling me to go buy 30 units. I'm going to go buy my next, single family or duplex BRRRR deal or whatever. It was too big for my head at the time. It didn't seem fathomable. Why do you think you were able to think bigger so quickly and that didn't feel like too much at the time?
Yeah. So it literally just from reading a book and being like, this guy seems like a normal dude. He just talked about how he did it. So I was like, let me just copy his steps. And this is how I do everything. So like I do all these, I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm doing like all these 100-mile runs and all this crazy shit. Like same thing with that. I just see a normal dude do it. I'm like, I wonder if I can do that. And then just literally all I think about is where I'm at now, step A, then step B, which is the most immediate next step, and then step Z. And I literally don't know anything else in between. But as long as I figure out next step one at a time, you'll eventually get there. So like on the 16 plex, I've never bought a commercial deal before. I have no idea what the steps are. So I'd just be Googling and asking people, like, what do I need to do now? What do I need to do now? And then I just slowly go step by step until eventually I owned a 16 plex. I was like, all right, that's cool. I know how to do it now. But it's literally just like, I was just consuming content, and these books, like, they were mentors. Like, they were like, yeah, you can totally do it. Or I sit down with a guy like Gabe. He's like, yeah, you could totally do this. Like, you just do this, this, and this. Simple. I own 116 plexes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things in real estate, and we talk about this a lot, is so much of it is just doing the thing. It's not, none of it is rocket science. It's probably, I forget what kind of engineering you did, but it's probably not as complicated as engineering. There's there's a book you can go get that will tell you exactly, do step 1, do step 2, and eventually you're going to buy it. The hard part is nobody wants to do it's not hard, it's hard, but it's not complicated, is how I would put it.
Simple.
Sending 100 letters to people that own 16 plexes in the Salem area, that's not complicated. Anyone can do that, but it's not easy. It's the hard work that nobody wants to do, and I think that's your probably. Like, I feel like that's everything that I've ever heard about your business is just like, I read a book and then I went and just did it. I just followed the steps to it. Is that something that you've have you always been that way?
No, so I used to read like too many books and consume too much information, then do nothing with it. And then I learned, like, I don't know if I heard it or where I probably read it, honestly. But they're like, if you're reading this book and you are not taking a step that I'm giving you in this book, like, there's no point in reading it. You don't need knowledge just to have it. Like, you got to take action steps. So now what I'll do is I'll like have my favorite book and I'll actually reread it and I'll implement something else from it and keep going. But it's just insane because someone put their whole life's work into a $15 book for you. And they're like, here's exactly what I did. If you want to do it, awesome. If not, do what you want with this information.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so then you buy the 16 unit, you have that fourplex you said you lost a bunch of money on, but you're 25, you become a millionaire. That's a pretty big deal at age 25.
Yeah,
Then
so I had
you
to buy.
go through. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say like to actually reach like a millionaire, I owned like 30 something doors or so, and then I had like 300 grand cash also, or 400 grand cash maybe too. And I was just stockpiling cash from brokering. I wholesaled like a deal, and then I like was just sitting on that. Um, so that was crazy to me because I was like, I had a 10-year plan. I did it in like a year and a half.
So then, when you hit that point, I know we talked a little bit offline, and I've talked to you. I've heard some of this story, but you went through a pretty rough period, right, where you lost a lot of it and then got it back. I sometimes when I'm talking to anybody in real estate, it's not because I'm a jerk and want to hear people's downfalls or whatever, but I do think it's sometimes we learn more from where people went sideways than we do from victories. Um, how did that happen? Take us through it.
No, I did the same thing on the podcast. That was that
I know you do.
the worst deal you did. Yeah. So I like at 25 to have 400 grand or whatever cash, be a millionaire, own all these properties, and be acquiring more. I was like, I'm done. Like this is great. Um, little did I. So I was also reading books. I read this book about happiness. It's like, okay, once you've done these things, you have to enjoy what you have done and stop being so like tight around money. So I decided for a year I wasn't going to track any dollars that I was spending. And I was like, at the end of the year, like, I'm not going to blow through this whole 400. So, like, at the end of the year, I'll still see what I spent. And then I was like, that's the ideal life. I could have done that for 2 months, multiplied by 6, and then that would have been a way better choice, right? But so I blew through a ton of money doing that. But I was also so new at owning properties. I was only a few years in that I stopped tracking my property performance. And then I bought like 58 more units that were just the biggest pieces of shit you could ever buy. And I don't know how to rehab shit, right? Like I had partners who did, but like we were just figuring out as we go. So I bought too much property for where I was at. And then I also bought this fourplex with some partners who were stealing money from me and I wasn't tracking or paying attention to because I'm like, I'm set. Um, so I did the combination of those three things and I literally blew through all my money. I blew through like 800 grand between spending, lost money, and stolen money and went from where I was like, I never have to do anything again at this point based on my cash flow, how much cash I'm sitting on. Like I'm retired to holy shit, I have negative $200,000 in like credit cards and lines of credit. And I have no income because I stopped doing anything to like, oh, this is a major problem. Well, so I spent the next like year and a half being like, how do I figure this out? And that was stressful, obviously, but I was just like, again, read enough books and I'd seen so many people do it. I was like, okay, there's a way to fix this. I just have to figure out what the next step is. And I had my head in the sand at the beginning because I was like, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to deal with this kind of thing. First, I could have, like, now we help people with that problem all the time. And like, people are like, I have 20 grand and whatever. I'm like, okay, like, sell one property and then you're fine. Like, you have like a whole schedule of real estate. Like, if it's really that stressful to you. And that's what the solution was for me. I sold a couple properties. I was like, oh, I just paid back all this money. Like, yeah, it sucks to sell them because now I'm missing out on all the cash flow from them and all the long term wealth. But the level of stress to be able to get rid of that to buy more deals was worth it. And the learning lessons too were insane from doing that.
Yeah, sometimes I mean, life doesn't entirely exist in a spreadsheet, and sometimes it is worth it. Like I think about that a lot. Like, regardless of where my portfolio, the number that you want to keep in cash gets bigger as your portfolio gets bigger. But some of it, it's not a formula. It's just sometimes it's just like what is going to be good for my mental health, and I'm not going to wake up in the middle of the night worrying about money or so. It's a good experience that you to learn that early on. Okay, wait, I want to dive in a little more on that though. So there was you mentioned three things. You spent too much, you bought too many properties too quick, and then you had some bad partners. First
Yeah.
on the spending part, I know you're not a big spender. Like what were you running through all your money on?
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, a lot of it was education. Like I paid like 12, 15 grand to go to like a mastermind and like learn more about real estate, which was totally worth it. Uh, I spent like 30 grand on food because I refused to cook anything and I was living downtown. So I ate out every
I
meal. I
still
seen
do
like
that.
2 meals at a time. Yeah. And then like I was like, oh, I don't need to house hack anymore. I moved into like a more expensive apartment. Now I'm like going from living for free to paying whatever 2 grand a month. And it's just like, and I didn't spend like that much. Honestly, it was probably like 100 grand or something. But I went from spending like 12 grand to 100. So that's like 10 times almost.
Right.
Um, and that in itself wasn't that bad had I just done that. It was mostly like, okay, bad partnerships and then buying shit ton of properties at once. It was the combination of the three things that added all the stress. Had I not done one of them, it would have been much nicer.
Okay, so let's talk about the other two. What did you said you bought too many properties? I mean, we talk all the time. I know you guys' motto is like buy all the real estate. We want to own all the doors. What I mean, did you get caught up in the because you were still fairly early on at that point, just like I want to hit X number
Ego,
of doors and I'm not gonna like actually figure out if the numbers work or anything. I just want to buy them all, or what happened there, and how did you end up buying too many?
ego. So my whole goal was 100 doors. I was just like, I want to get to 100 doors. And it was just an ego investment. I'd rather have 20 doors that are well performing versus 100 pieces of shit doors, right? I'm really glad I bought those 100 doors and will make a lot of money over time. Like, I didn't have the sufficient, well, I guess I did because I made it through it, right? So it worked out. But had I do that again or recommend it to someone, I would have more of a reserve fund. And then my operations at that point were not good enough to go like, so I'm partnered with Gabe. Gabe writes an extra $30,000 check. Gabe doesn't care. High income earner, right? I'm making very little money at that time living off this passive income. So my margins are much thinner. So me going writing a $30,000 check means a lot more to me. So like if he changes it from 30 to 60, he's like, whatever. 30 to 60 for me, I was like, holy shit, that's 10% of my money just went away right there.
Yeah.
So part of it was like I actually nailed the numbers on the front end. I'd never bought anything like that, like heavy value add. So it was actually pretty cool because like looking back at it, I was like, oh, I actually killed the repair budget and all this stuff. Execution was poor. Like we could have structured it way better, operated it better. And that's the goal now is building that part of the business out and taking those lessons learned. But it also helped me buy more deals because I was like, okay, if I could buy these that literally these things, like sewage filled under the bottom of like the buildings, the roofs were falling apart, slumlord like wasn't giving these people heat at all, like just tenants not paying. Like it was about the worst properties you could buy. One of them we were buying, it was about to be condemned, and they didn't tell us like the city was sending the notices or anything. So like, yeah,
I was
these
gonna
were
say
these were
it sounds
pieces of
like you
shit.
it sounds like you made a lot of some of these sellers day during that period, probably, right? These guys were probably so excited to get rid of these properties.
Yeah, no one else wanted them, and we came in. No, we'll make money on them over time. We got long term fixed rate debt, like they're fine. But it's just like the amount of work I thought it was going to be, and my experience level was not there yet. But that's also how you get there. Like I did it, I learned, and now I go do those properties all the time.
So you said you underwrote them right, but you just didn't have. So your numbers were right, but you just didn't have the cash reserves that you should have had.
Partially, and then we blew through the repair budget. So, like, had we operated it properly, my numbers were right. We were operating it poorly, and we were just writing checks without checking bids, without like, we were just giving funds to the property manager, who's just like, it's not their money. Like, they're great, but like, they're not an asset manager. They're not like,
Right.
do we actually need to spend this much money here versus there? And we just wrote them basically a blank check for $500,000 that they blew through in like 3 months. I was like, oh shit, that was supposed to last us a year. Um, so like had we operated properly, like I actually killed like how much the unit turns would take, like how we transitioned through the plan, but we didn't execute upon it.
When you when you talk about being an asset manager, because I get this question sometimes, like when I'm raising money, and I know you've got quite a bit of experience now raising money. Is that I get people that ask that are because when you're the asset manager, you take a ownership portion typically for kind of running the show. And I think a lot of people do think that the property managers there's kind of like, well, there's a property manager, so what are you for? Is that a conversation you've run into?
I haven't, and I honestly haven't raised that much money. Like our team has, but like me personally, I've partnered with people and got them to contribute money to deals. Haven't raised a ton, just a little bit. Um, but no, people, I don't think so. I don't know if Dane runs into that same problem, but like it's just a different thing. Like as an asset manager, you're not dealing with the day-to-day operations, but you're looking at the property performance. How do you maximize over time? And then you give the property manager the plan. And then like we're looking like from a portfolio perspective too of when to move these pieces or what we should be doing with them, how to acquire the next. But asset management, like it's completely different than property management. I actually want to like hire it out third party and see if that's an option. Because I've seen some of these like professionalized asset managers where you can get them part time in there. So we're considering like just because we want to acquire more, like how can we outsource this or can we hire someone in house to do this? Because I think it pays for itself. Like had I had an asset manager on that property, like we would have spent way less money and they would have been a free employee at that point, basically.
So do you do? I think I've heard of that actually, like third party asset managers. So you have to give them some kind of equity, right? So they have skin in the game because
They
if you
take
pay them a
fee.
flat rate, they can't. They're just they're not incentivized in the same direction as you, right?
Maybe my thought was fee, and I haven't looked into that much. So I gotta learn more about it because we're just throwing like, okay, do we do this in house or do we hire it out? Like, but we just we want to optimize it because realistically, like from increasing your NOI on these properties, like like $100 a month, $1,200 a year on a six cap is $20,000 in value. So when you have like 200 units that you're optimizing, like, and you're looking at refinances, like that's millions of dollars potentially that you're blowing just from like those small incremental changes.
Right, and that's a thing. Anybody who's a business owner, a skill you need to get used to is delegating stuff. So many people tap out really quickly because it's kind of the the old if you want it done right, do it yourself, and they'll never lose control of their business at all, or they'll feel like they're losing control if they hire out. I've done it, and then after a while, I realize I'm doing this job and I'm half-assing it because I have 10 other jobs. Seems like, I mean, you guys, we can get into Vesta. Well, you've got a couple different businesses, but it seems like you've kind of seen the light bulbs gone on that pretty quickly, right? As far as hiring and talk about that a little bit, how you built your business.
Yeah, and this is like pretty fresh into it. And we always so for people starting out, if you want to do business, pick one business and only do one business. We used to think more was better, and that is the opposite. So right now we have two businesses, and we should realistically probably still only have one. And anyone listening, if they want to learn about business, Alex Hormozy, like he has all these books that are just insane about how you actually go from knowing nothing to doing it. So we're not that experienced or not that far in, but we were essentially just brokering deals ourselves, and you're on a treadmill of like constant work. I learned like, hey, my skill set, I'm really good at this portion of like investment planning, figuring out how we grow and scale and do more deals, but I don't need to do like the day to day paperwork. So like we started hiring out to do these tasks to save ourselves time, to then do the higher dollar tasks. And the idea is you keep on doing that. So like with our company now, we just help people build and scale real estate portfolios. So it's just normal brokerage services with investment advisory on top. Lets us like work with people like you so we can add more value to you at the same rate as anyone else. And then it's more valuable to you, more valuable to us because we can do more deals with you too at that point.
Yeah, so we'll get into Vesta Solutions a little bit, which, as you mentioned, Trevor, I'm a customer. I doubled my portfolio last year, and it is a cool service. And by the way, guys, I'm not a paid spokesperson for Vesta, just a customer. But it is a cool service because it kind of gives you're going to be paying. Well, if you're a buyer, you're not paying a commission, but if you're basically you're getting for the same cost, you're getting all the services of writing up offers and the basics, but it's more of a comprehensive, like they've worked with me a lot as far as building out kind of a long-term plan for what I want with my portfolio, from going to single family to duplex to fourplex to sixplex to getting up into the 18, 20 unit stuff. Is that Trevor, you talk about, we were talking about hiring out and doing the high dollar tasks for you right now. Is that the planning portion, or what in a perfect world, what would be like your one high best and highest use that you would like to be doing there?
Yeah, talking about deals probably with people. So like deals, goals, figuring out what is the plan and how do we take that next step. Not necessarily me executing it hand by hand with you, but me doing like the advising and coaching. Just because like it's like, okay, I bought these 160, 180 units. Like I went through these problems, so I can look at someone's portfolio that's a few steps behind me, and then we can map it out easy enough. So like that, and that's why I like doing. Like I just talk about real estate deals all day long. So if I get to get paid to do that, like it's fucking awesome.
Do you enjoy the like do you get a reward out of helping people build wealth, or I don't know all of your clients, but somebody closes on their first deal, or somebody is able to quit their job, or whatever their goal is. Does that bring a lot of do you get a lot of joy out of that?
It's insane because you're changing people's lives. Like actually, like their whole financial future is being changed. Like give you a good example. We have this good friend Kevin, and he came in, and this was before we were even doing it. So this is something like I'd inadvertently been doing just on my own. Like even when I was an engineer, I was helping these like 50-year-olds with like building financial plans of how they save more money and put their money in like the stock market. It's like I just love doing it. Like it's rewarding. So like you'll have a guy like Kevin, and he comes down, and he's like, hey, like I make this much money at my job. I want to invest in real estate. Why do it? I'm like, hey man, like you're a ways out, but like you got to go find a job that pays you this. Here's how you can go do it. And then he goes and takes the steps, buys some rentals, and he's like, holy shit, like I just changed my whole financial path from not that much time I had to spend with him, but I got to have a huge impact on his life, or I feel like I did. And it's like I get to have those interactions every single day. Like most people, like they may not do anything with the information, but the people who do, like it's pretty cool to see.
What do you think is in within Vesta? What is your what would you say your ratio is? The number of people you talk to versus the number that go out and kind of take action on it?
Oh, so we run like a whole sales funnel now. So like they'll talk to the team like multiple steps before they talk to me necessarily. But even from the people who get to me, like 50% maybe at that point or
That's
so.
pretty
I don't know.
good.
We actually have the data because we like track it through the whole sales funnel. But like by the time they're getting to me, they're like, I want to do this usually. Like, what are the next steps? So it's hard to say. But when I was doing it on the front end, probably like I was targeting so many people, like 5% maybe. And that's like Gabe. So Gabe has had why me and Gabe became friends is because he had the same conversation he had with me hundreds of times, like like twice a day, probably for 7 years, if not more times than that. And then like very few people actually do anything with it. I was just like, cool, thanks for the info. Buy a 16-plex, call him back 6 months later. Like, hey man, like, thanks for the advice. I bought this 16-plex because you told me this, this, and this, and I did it. And so he's like, oh, like let's do some deals together, maybe. But and
Yeah,
so he got like I was rewarded by it, but he also like he changed my whole life the same way like I try to pass it to others.
right. I was talking to Mike about that last week because there's this when you're first, like, you probably heard this on Bigger Pockets. There, when you're first learning and listening to podcasts or reading, there's always this idea that like you need to bring value to whoever you're meeting with or whoever you're talking to. And the reality is, if you're a 22-year-old who has one single family home, you're not going to bring value to Gabe. Like there's nothing that you can bring him. So there's nothing like dollars and cents value, I guess,
Yeah.
or expertise or any of that. What you can bring, which Mike had a really good answer this last week, is you can bring energy and action. Like it's really fun for people that are at that stage to just see a young guy or gal that just goes and it's sort of an ignorance is bliss stage where they're just like firing off offers. They don't really know what they're doing, but they're taking action, and it's very energizing to people. And then eventually, those 5% of conversations, it might be somebody, a situation like you where you down the road, you come back and like you said, I bought a 16 unit, and then you end up working together. I mean, that's the value they can get out of it long term. But day one, like you don't need to fool yourself. You're not going to bring value to people who are way further along than you.
Mm-hmm. Everyone loves talking about themselves. So like I am good at, or I just am curious. So I ask a lot of questions and people just love sitting there. And I'm just like, that's amazing that you did that. And I'm just like inadvertently hyping them up and making them feel good. So like, oh, that's cool. This person, like my wife doesn't ask me about all these deals that I own or whoever else it may be. Right. So like the 16 unit I bought, for example, like I took that guy to lunch. I didn't even try to buy it from him. I was just like, how did you do this? How did you buy all this stuff? And he was literally like, I wish my son was like you and wanted to own this property, so I'm going to sell you this property. And that was the whole reason why he sold it to me, just because I took an interest in his life and what he was doing. And it wasn't like I didn't, like you said, like I didn't give the thing a real value other than they felt good. Like that was it.
No, I mean that's sales 101, and you did it basically accidentally. There's people that take I mean, when I was in corporate, we used to take all these sales programs, and that's we would work on that, just, be curious, ask a million open-ended questions, and then you get back to the office the next day and everybody's doing the same shit they were doing before, and they're talking, you always, that's a key for, show interest in other people. And it's hard because you can't fake it. It has to be genuine, but you do that, people love to talk about themselves and they love that you care and you're not just there like, what's the quickest way that I can buy your house from you, you know?
Yeah.
So do you enjoy like the people management side of it as well? Now that you've got a bit of a team under you?
Uh, time to time, like there's pros
Yeah.
and cons to it. And I'm
Yeah.
still learning, like, because we're 8 months in probably ish to what we've been doing the way we've been doing it now. So like we've had the entity for like a year and a half or something like
Hmm.
that. But like when we started like our company, we literally had no idea what we were selling or who we were selling it to. Like we had zero idea. Me and Dane were just, we're brokering together. We should do this thing and figure it out. We're like, okay, cool. Now we actually like have plans of like, which is like, we should have had it front end. We just didn't know what we didn't know. But it's like, okay, if you have a business, what do you sell and who do you sell it to? Like very simple. And we didn't, we're like, we have nothing to sell and no one to sell it to. And that was the first year of business.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember right when you guys were. I think you had launched, but you were still figuring that stuff out. Dane called me, and he was I think he was doing sort of a survey of some of the people that had worked with you. But it's pretty cool what you guys have built, and I know a decent amount of the team now, and it seems like you guys have built it's we always hear the word culture get thrown around in business, like in corporate. It's always sort of cringe, or it's like about because they have kombucha on tap or whatever. Um, but you guys, it does seem like have built a pretty cool culture. Like I don't know, I've spent limited time around you and the team, but when I'm in Oregon, I spend some time with you guys. Is there like a particular? I mean, you want to hire people because they're good and they have skills, but you also, if you're trying to build something long term, it does matter a lot if they're a fit. Like nobody wants to go to work if there's a jerk that's you know giving bad vibes at the
Yeah.
office every day. It sucks the air out of the room. So have you like read a book on that, or how do you go? I know you hire for skills, but talk about the culture piece and how you make sure somebody's a fit for what you guys are doing.
Yeah. I think we're learning over time. So like we had hired many marketing people or other things for like short term roles and stuff we were doing. And then just found out they were bad and had to fire them and go through that many times. Um, so the question is, how do we find who's a good fit? Um, And so like the people we work with now, they literally came through our program. So like we got to know them over that time and they liked what we were doing and wanted to be a part of it. So like those people were awesome. Like Sabrina, I helped, she had already owned a rental actually. And then we helped her build up her portfolio a bit. Now she's continuing to build it. So she gets value from working with us. And then she loves real estate. So she gets to do something cool every day. Um, Other than that, like, dude, we're gonna hire so many bad people. Still, probably like we don't even have that skill. I would say yet because we're
Yeah.
winging it as we go. Like all the people we're hiring are like I post on Facebook. Hey, I like when we got our marketing person, we didn't even know what we needed. For example, I was like, hey, like I think this is what I need. Does anyone know anyone like this? And then we hired her like part time, and then we threw her on full time, and we like completely shifted her role. And we're just like, hey, can you go learn how to like do this stuff and then come back? It's like we're figuring it out as we go. Like I'm not a good business advisor. I would say like,
Yeah. Dude, it's hiring and firing is one of the hardest skills. Like when I started doing, when I was in corporate, I remember I'd always be like, why do we need an in-house recruiter, or why do we need HR? Like it's
oh,
not that
I could
hard.
see how you definitely need those. Yeah.
Yeah, now I totally get it. Like I am still probably similar. I'm still not great at it. I've definitely learned some stuff. But when I started, like I don't know about you, the one I would always do is I would find a way to like talk myself into someone. I would there'd be like red flags, or maybe they weren't it's like, well, no, I'm a good boss, so I'll make them into the thing that I
Yeah.
want them to be. And most of the time that's not not that you can't teach people. Like being teachable or being coachable is a skill, but most of the time if you're having to talk yourself into it, that's not a great sign.
Yeah, I think attitude for us, it's not like a super high skilled thing that we're doing. So it's like
Yeah.
we can teach it as long as someone's willing to learn and has a good attitude for the most part, and it's like reliable. like the biggest thing, like we were hiring a bunch of marketing companies and they just never do what they said.
Yeah.
It seems pretty straightforward to me, but like I don't know. Like,
Yeah. It's accountability, and then just like your ability to kind of wanting to learn, like basically checking your ego and being willing to accept that maybe you don't know everything. And it's important as a boss too. I mean, I don't know about you, like I learn stuff from my employees all the time. They're just better. That's why you hire people, because they're better at stuff than you.
that's the goal, yeah, and they are, and like honestly, like I'm probably not a very good boss right now. Like, like that's something that I'm so new to that I'm like trying to read books on and learn how to do like
Yeah.
properly, and like how do I set expectations that I also follow and do all these things, slash communicate, because like how I communicate to Dane is like I can be straightforward and just tell him like whatever because we're doing the same thing, but like if I communicate to an employee like that, like it's probably very offensive, like I'm coming off very like rude. I don't know. So there's a lot of stuff like I'm just figuring out as I go. Like I have no clue, and I'll probably mess up a lot as we go.
Yeah. So we talked about this for a second, is totally switching gears. Why the hell do you want to run 100 miles?
Dude, okay. So it's just monkey see, monkey do. That's basically how I live my life. I just see someone do something, I'm like, I think I could do that. Try it out. So I did this thing, for example, when I lived downtown Salem like 4 years ago. They do the half Ironman in the Frank, like in my yard, basically there at the park. I was like, that's cool. I look up the distances. I'm like, let me try this. So I go do a half Ironman the next weekend. And then for the next like 2 months or so, I just try a crazy physical endurance event every single week. So I went for like David Goggins' pull-up record. And this is all just from me listening to these dudes on podcasts and being like, yeah, that's sick. Like these guys are hyping me up, reading their books. Go for his pull-up record. I do like 9 hours of pull-ups. And I do like 2,800 or 2,400 pull-ups, whatever it is, in 9 hours. And his is like 4,000, so not even 75% of the way there, but I'm still like, that's an insane thing I just did. Then I go run like a marathon, and then I go to Bend and I run up 3 mountains and run in between them. And then you know who Jesse Itzler is?
Mm-mm.
Dude, you would love him. He's one of my favorite dudes. He owns the Atlanta Hawks. He's married to Sarah Blakely, who's the daughter's
I've heard
name.
him on a podcast. I do know him.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and you know David Goggins, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So before David Goggins was famous for all this stuff, he saw David Goggins at a race. He's like, this guy is insane. Invite him to live at his house with him for 30 days just to like get some of whatever special sauce he had. And he writes this book about it, like not even using David's name or anything. But he's just like this crazy dude. But he has this event where it's called 29029, which is the elevation of Mount Everest. And you would hike up, gondola down. And I was like, that's insane. Like, I want to do this, but it's really expensive to go to. And it was really cheap. So I tried to go rent out a mountain and do it myself here. And I was like 24. No one would let me do that. But eventually, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to go find a hill in Eugene. And I'm going to go up and down it. So I would hike up, run down for 36 hours straight until I hit to the 29,000 feet of elevation. So I did the equivalent of Mount Everest. So I was there on like a Friday, Saturday or something. Friday morning, I'm going. Same people come back the next day and they're like, oh, you're back too. And I'm like, I've been going for the past 24 hours, just up and down this thing. And it's just kind of to see what I can do. And I'm also just like halfway insane, probably.
So I mean, you're obviously a very driven guy. You like challenges. I mean, what big picture, like I know you want to buy all the real estate, you want to do crazy, physical challenges. What do you have any? I mean, you're gonna, by all accounts, own a ton of real estate. You already own a lot, but what do you? Not to get like too deep, but like, what do you want out of all this? What is your? I'm not saying have an end goal. I think that's kind of a lame question. Like, we all just want to be happy and build businesses and build cool lives. But like, what do you want out of all this long term?
Yeah. So doing interesting things helps you meet interesting people. So that's like a cool perspective to it. I learned, so as my goals as I progress through life, I was like, okay, first one was reach financial independence, right? Then next one was become a millionaire, then own 100 units and so on and so forth. And I never like, my happiness was the same every single, I always thought when I would hit the next one, like that's it, like I did it. But it's just, you move on to the next thing. So I want to do things that excite me throughout that whole time period and I struggle with it, probably so does everyone, but getting
Yeah.
lost in like the future vision, that's a really bad thing to do. Because now like my goal is we're trying to make $1 billion. So that's going to take however many years it takes, right? And so am I going to be unhappy until I reach that goal, or am I going to, like, you have to enjoy the process as you go. Are you going to glare? I can close this too. Sorry.
I'm good. I don't see anything, but yeah,
Okay.
if you're getting on your end.
My bad.
There we go.
But yeah, so like I don't have an end goal necessarily of other than I just want to spend my time how I choose in that moment, and it will change from time to time. And enjoy as I go. But like, I'm just willing to like, I lost 200 grand. And I lost all the money I had. So I see what it's like when that happens. And it's like, okay, everyone's worst case scenario, if you live in America, isn't that bad. Some people have it. Like, I'm lucky on what I started off on, but like my worst case, like I lose every single thing I have plus more. Like I could redo it all. And like, if I'm healthy, like awesome. I've learned all this information. It's a cool story for later. I don't have a family. I don't have a wife and all this stuff, right? So I can take on whatever amount of risk. But I mean, I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. But I just
No,
like
it was a great
try to
answer.
pick something big enough that's exciting to go and do, and then I want to do it with other people. Like if it's just me doing it, that's not worth doing anything really. Just on your own, it's not fun. Like I like having partners on all these deals, so like it's great in the good times, and then the bad times, it's like, okay, guys, like let's figure it out. Unless you have bad partners, then that's even worse.
Yeah, it's better to be a solopreneur than have bad partners. But it is.
Mhm.
It's so much more fun when you can bring other people into the fold. I did a lot of that early on. I'm actually now getting to the point where I'm bringing other people in. I did a lot of stuff by myself, and it's cool. Like it's cool to have success, but it's so much more fun when there's other people involved. Um, you mentioned, so you've already been through that of, you did sort of lose it all at one point, and you came through it, and you touched on like when you live in a first world country and you have food on your plate and you have shelter, like we talk about risk, like your risk is honestly not that high because most of the world would give anything to be where you are. Now, but in the sense of the purest sense of just portfolio risk, like when people say risk in financial terms, you guys, looking at the way you invest, I would say, because I know you pretty well now from you underwritten my deals, you've showed me your stuff you're working on. I would say you have a pretty high risk tolerance in the sense you'll take on a lot of leverage, but you also are pretty tight with underwriting. Like you don't underwrite like pie in the sky deals. So the way I would describe it is you're pretty tight with it up front, but then you do leverage pretty heavily, and you try to buy some time to kind of grow into that valuation of the property. But most people from the outside would look, if they could see what you do, would say you have a pretty high risk tolerance. How do you think about risk in a purely portfolio sense?
Yeah. So if we're syndicating using other people's money, completely different story than what we'll
Different.
do on our own, right? So
Yeah.
like you could not lose someone else's money or do anything that has like that's your biggest downfall because your reputation is screwed. Like how we'll do that versus what I'll do personally, completely different. So me personally, you're answering the question of like, okay, how much leverage is too much leverage? If I put no money into a deal, do I have more or less risk? And people will answer that question different ways, right? Some people will be like, oh, it's 100% leverage. That's super risky. But if I have no money in the deal, what am I risking? And it's just like, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will buy a deal 100% levered 100% of the time if I can. If I have long-term fixed rate debt and I have a way to exit it, where you run into a problem is if you do that and it's a short time frame, like how are you going to go in and out of this deal? And that's where you see a lot of people lose, or like flippers, or like people doing things like that. But over a 10-year like horizon in the United States, real estate has never gone down in value. So if I go buy a deal 100% levered and I wait 10 years, I have a 10-year balloon, let's say, about 22% of that loan will be paid down over time. So even if my property didn't go up by $1 in value, I could potentially bring in another 3% and just refinance it. So I was like, especially if I'm buying value add. So, and this is like flippers buy 100% levered all the time, like on a burb too.
Right.
So it's like, and so it's funny. I was listening to actually a podcast with Dave Ramsey, and he was talking about like leverage. He's like, these real estate guys talk leverage, 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 but they get to a point of like, oh, now 90% leverage. Like, that's too risky, but 80 is, and or whatever it may be. And I'm like, and I think unlimited amount of leverage is like, depending on how you use it, right? Can be, that's what you want to do. And most people actually do take 100% leverage. So like if you're syndicating a deal or these guys on Wall Street, they're using not their own equity, not their own debt. Like they're just leveraging it in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's when we talk about risk. Like often everybody focuses on the number, right? The amount of leverage or 100% levered, but the piece where people blow up, you touched on this more often, is duration risk. I mean, if you talk to people that blew up in 08, 09, I mean, a lot of it was, I mean, I've heard so many stories of people that owned apartments and they were like operationally, they were fine. Their DSCR covered. They didn't have vacancy. But by all accounts, they had a performing asset, but their loan reached maturity at the wrong time and liquidity shut off, and nobody would refinance it for them. So that's what you're talking about, right? We buy a 10-year window to figure it out, basically. And what might happen, you always, I think that's another Buffett quote, is don't take the loan when you need it. Take the loan when you can get it. So you might be, you get that 10-year balloon, you might refinance it in 5 years or 3 years.
I probably won't hold up ever 10 years is my guess.
It doesn't mean you wait till 10 years. It means you've bought yourself a 10-year window to figure out when the right time is. So that duration can actually be more important than what you can be 95% levered or 90% levered. And if it's a 1-year balloon, that's a really bad place to be in. You could be 110% levered. It's a 10-year balloon. That might not be that bad a spot to be in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just looking at the deal. I'm like, okay, on this long-term fixed rate debt and this interest rate that I'm getting and today's market rent, will this deal pay for itself? Like if the answer is yes, then it's probably worth owning because you may not cash flow a lot day one. Even if I don't even cash flow that whole deal, like do I have loan pay down, appreciation? And then you may not even have appreciation. You could still beat the market with just appreciation and loan pay down even.
Yeah, and that's a thing I had to learn because I always, I was like, it's got a cash flow. It's got a cash flow. And it's kind of funny with real estate, like everyone thinks in cash flow terms. When you're buying stocks, I mean, unless it has a massive dividend or something, your stock isn't cash flowing. You're buying it because you can sell it for more down the road. And that's one thing you guys have actually helped me a lot with is switching because I remember a couple of the first deals we underwrote, like it was a couple of them were break even or even might have lost a little bit of money the first year. And you're like, Matt, you're getting a check. Like you're getting money at closing. This is the same thing as cash flowing throughout the year. You're just getting it all right now, and you're buying yourself 10 years to pay, all the things you mentioned, pay it down, get depreciation, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and it's different for everyone's goals, right? So like I'm willing to do that, but for clients, it's like that may not be the best role for 99% of them because I'm trying to acquire all of the real estate. So like I have to do things that are not normal probably to do that.
Yeah, and yours is different, different than mine. Like your goal is to buy all of the real estate. That's not most people's goal. Here's another question for you I'm curious about. How do you do you care about the money part, or how do you think about money? Do you spend a lot of, or do you, how do you think about the money portion of it?
Scorekeeping. So it's like a metric used. Like, and it's obviously cool. Like, I'm not that, like, I guess I'm wealthy, but I've been like where I'm the wealthiest I've ever been, but also the least amount of cash, which is a really contradictory, like, spot to be in where you feel like I've had way less property, way less wealth before, but felt rich because I was sitting on so much cash.
Liquid,
like, yeah. So there's a balance of it. And I've learned like, oh, it's really cool to just be able to go to New York tomorrow and do all these things. So like I've bought the lifestyle inflation with it and I want to build that up over time. But like all the activities and things I do cost almost nothing. So like I lived off 10 grand. I'm the same happiness living off 10 grand as I am now, whatever I spend. And like, it's not all that different. So I want the things like we have boats. But dude, I drove a 2010 Prius I bought in cash, and I'm like, I'm just gonna drive this until it stops working because like I can buy a property with like this 50 grand rather than a new car. Um, and part of that is just like I still have those good financial habits that I built, and I only want to spend a certain percentage. And like with the business, we're like growing it. So like we're reinvesting dollars. And it's like, holy shit, we just hired too many people. So we actually didn't even get to pay ourselves this month. We had to put in like 3 grand. Like it's like, okay, so I want to reduce my risk from like my living expenses to be able to grow over here and delay the gratification. One thing Gabe always talks about is like how long you want to delay gratification for. That was part of it, right? So it's a fine balance. So like, yeah, I want to own these things. Like it's cool that we have a boat that we go wake surfing on, but it's like, do I need the nicest car in the world right now too? Like, will that bring me happiness? For some people, like it's like, yeah, that does. For me, it's like, no, I'd rather buy this other property right now.
Yeah. Do you have stuff? I know you go on some cool trips and stuff like that. What do you like to spend money on that isn't real estate, that isn't buying a deal or hiring somebody like for yourself?
Yeah, coaching. So like
That's
I have a running coach, I have a weights coach, I'm gonna get a
oh,
stretching coach, like just for all this stuff where I'm like, I don't because I coach. So like I'm like, oh, I can just pay someone that spent all their life. Like so for example, I spent 2 years lifting weights, made like zero progress, paid a dude 250 a month to be my weights coach. And I made more progress in 3 months than I did in 2 years. And I doubled all my weights. I spent half the amount of time in the gym just because he gave me the information to the plan. So it's like, that's exactly what we do for people for real estate. So I appreciate it elsewhere. But like to run 100 miles, I was like, I don't know how to run 100 miles, but let me pay someone 250 a month who does. He'll build me the plan. We hop on a Zoom call every month and he just helps me through it.
and it saves you time, right? You don't have to research
Would
how to
never do
build a
it.
good
Yeah.
program, or that's the other thing. You'd never do it. Like you're busy with other stuff. That's a mindset shift with a lot of wealthy people is getting used to paying people to either to buy back your time or to bring expertise to the table. It's not wasted money. I mean, A,
Yeah.
you're getting value out of it because they're experts in their field, but B, you're freeing up time to do what you're actually really good at, and you're what you're paying them, you're gonna make it up in the extra time that you have to do what you actually are good at and what earns you money.
Yeah, dude, you should do this too. So I bought meal service too. And they just drop off all my meals twice a week. And it was the sickest thing ever because I hate cooking. And like, it's just like perfect nutritional count mapped out for you. So you're
Yeah,
eating exactly what you need and you don't have to think about it. And I'm like, this is amazing.
dude, I've looked at it. Because I go out to every single meal. I don't buy groceries,
Yeah.
and I want to do it, but I live in like a little Manhattan apartment, and so I like going out to eat is like my excuse to get out of the apartment and not go crazy living in a little space. But I've
Yeah.
definitely looked at
Good. So,
buying
so
one of
you'll
those.
do it. Yeah. So what I would do it for was depending on how I'm doing it. There's if 7 days a week, 3 meals a day, 21 meals on the week, right? So I would do anywhere from 15 to 18, and I'd be like, okay, I'm perfectly nutritionally fit for like 90% of my meals, and then these other 3 to 6, like I'll just go eat out and do whatever. Like I
Mhm.
don't even have to. Now I don't have to measure anything. I don't have to count my calories. Like, and then it just gets the results. And that was like the sickest thing ever. And then I had one like private chef lady who like had a business thing doing it. It was like $10 a meal. Like it was cheap, like cheaper than me cooking, I feel like. And then she just ghosted us all and stopped responding. So I was like, oh shit. Like I gotta figure out what to do now.
Dude, that is one of my career goals. Actually, is to like when I have a house to get a personal chef. I think that
That'd be
would be
sick.
one of my coolest things to spend money on.
Yeah. So to be fair, like I don't care about taste at all. I was just literally like, I need this nutritional goal. So like other
Yeah.
people like food. Like
Oh, I love.
like
Yeah.
I don't yeah. So like you get value out of the enjoyment of like knowing I'd be like, I have no idea what I'm eating, but it meets my goal. So like we're good.
Cool, man. I wanted to ask you one last thing about what you've built at Vesta. You guys have invested heavily in social media. I mean, social media meetups. By the way, if you're listening to this, whether you're new or got a million doors, go to the Salem meetup. It's super cool. I go whenever I'm in town. But social media meetups, podcasts. Do you see that? Like, do you do you track like ROI from that stuff, or do you do it because you like it, or is it kind of just a combination of the two?
Yeah, it all started organically. So the meetup was like we were driving to Portland, Eugene, Corvallis to go to all the meetups because they're sick, and we're like we don't have one in Salem, so we just posted on Facebook one day, hey, anyone want to show up here like at this place this time? And like 40 people showed up. Then there was like 50 or 60 the next time, and I'm like we should probably like get a speaker maybe or something. Like, and they started compiling over time. Now we have like 100, 150 people going normally. So that like organically grew. Podcasts, we were just like we would meet every Friday and we would just talk about deals or things going on. So we're like, we should record this because people always ask if they could come. So that started. And then the social media stuff was super intentional. But like all the stuff now, like our marketing person tracks the data. Like where do leads come from that want to work with us? Like we get to see where all the places are so we can reinvest. But we're just in the phase of like starting to track it rather than like optimizing all of it because we had none of the data to start. We didn't know where anyone was coming from that found us or like what the best method was to like let our service be known.
Mm-hmm. So you're getting people, Vesta clients inbound. Are you getting deals inbound by doing that as well, or are you kind of already there just because everybody knows Gabe and knows your?
Yeah, a lot of our deals is going outbound. So it's hard to say because some of it is like the ecosystem of all the things. So someone may
Yeah.
hear me on this podcast and then see we're doing this and then see this elsewhere. And then eventually like they start to do something with you. So it's hard to fully know. Um, like we're just able to do deals because like we like buying deals. We try to be a super easy buyer, like which is the main thing.
Yeah.
And then like we try to make it a win for the seller. Like we're not just trying to rip a deal from them. We're trying to like, okay, what do you actually need to get here? And we offer you terms that still make sense for us to buy it. So like that may look like price, or they need a certain monthly payment if they're carrying a contract. Like there's all these different things, and some deals just aren't for us, right? To buy, like it's just like, but we'll like my job right now is acquisitions for our asset company. So like we're doing an 18 unit or 66 unit new construction project for $18 million. We're supposed to close on that thing, and that's a syndication we're doing. And then we just went under contract today, I think, on a 36 unit new construction project. And then we're going to actually go build 12 more units on that piece and the storage complex, I think. So like, I'm just looking at these deals and figuring out how do we turn them deals. And on those two pieces of land, it's like seller needed out of this deal, but he was willing to contribute the land to a partnership on these other deals. So now we have free and clear land that we can go take to the bank. They'll give us a loan and we can build on it with no money. That's like a pretty cool.
Yeah, there's so many. I'm just now kind of getting up into this larger multi-space. There's just so many different ways to do things than there are in, single family or one to four unit space. And the other thing you touched on, and tell me what you think about this, but I feel like when you get up into the larger buildings and development projects, you talked about being an easy buyer. I feel like your reputation matters so much more. I mean, we always talk about, off market, like wholesale and single, the kind of smaller wholesale and flip space where you're not really getting repeat business with people. Do you think that's fair to say that your reputation matters a hell of a lot more when you're buying bigger deals?
Yeah, there's way fewer people in the space. Like you think about the
Yeah.
single family space, I don't know how many houses and fourplexes there are, but I don't know how many times more. But like in the apartment space, I think in Oregon there's 5,000 apartments total, complexes total or something like that, and there's only so many people selling them. So it's like, okay, if we can be known as the people that pay you top dollar and make it a win for you, like, and you can come to us, like, awesome. I'm trying to actually take the marketing I've learned and apply it to that eventually. But this is where I'm messing up, is trying to do both these things at once. So I'm doing both kind of poorly. So that's something we're trying to figure out of like, okay, how can we market to sellers that we want to buy their property and make it a win for them and have that conversation. So then we can look at all these properties, we'll buy whatever percentage they allow us to, but we get to look at them all ahead of time is the goal. And we buy most of our stuff like on market, honestly, because you already have the seller there. Like most people try to do off market, which is great, but it takes more time, energy, and effort. And you have to have the system to get there. On market, like they're just listed. And I tell them like, here's 3 options of how I would buy it. Like, give me feedback. Like, let me make this work for you if possible.
Yeah, because all you learn in, single family space is you got to buy off market. In fact, I remember having this conversation with you when I first started buying, because everything I've bought through you guys, except maybe one deal was off market, but it's been almost all on market. And you talk about finding like motivated sellers. Well, no one is more motivated than someone who has their property listed on market. They, by definition, want, usually we've had a few sellers that were like, do you actually want to sell this? But usually that implies that you actually want to sell your house. And these are sophisticated sellers. Usually they're not single family. They're typically not, and they're not distressed sellers. So it's not about being able to rip a deal and get some ridiculously low price, but there's a lot more tolerance for creative terms and things like that where, okay, maybe I can pay you your full price, but we need you to, sell or carry at 3% on
Yeah.
200 grand. And there's just more knowledge in the space, because a lot of, you bring that to a single family home seller, their eyes are probably going to gloss over. They're going to say, wait, what? I just want my money.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot more levers that you can pull when you get into the bigger stuff.
Yeah, I'll give you an example one too. So we bought a 10-plex. This thing was worth, I don't know, 1.3, 1.4 million. They wanted 2.1 million to start, which was like insane. But we got down to like 1.6. We're like, we'll overpay you for this property. We'll pay you a rate where you're going to make the exact same amount of money you are right now, but you no longer have to manage the property. And then we gave them like 5% down, and we got a 10-year balloon. So we were fine overpaying for the property because we got terms that let us self-suffice from the property, and then we got to go add the value and take these rents from like 900 to 1400 or whatever they were over time. So we made it a win for them because they hated this thing. They had to show up and they were mowing the lawn. They were trying to collect rents. They didn't know how to fill it. We turned through every single one of their tenants on the property because they all stopped paying rent. And I was like, they were for sure dealing with that and just not collecting rent half the time.
Yeah.
Dude, we had one dude. Feds were after them. They had metal plated their whole door. They had stripper poles installed in their unit, and they were counterfeiting money in the unit too.
Oh
And
my God.
yeah, like the feds came and like I think another tenant we had that has since left too, like saw they were gone and kicked their door open and then like called the cops. And so we bought like, imagine you're just a self manager and you own this one property and that kind of stuff is going on and you don't know how to deal with it. Like, so we're like, we'll come solve all these problems for you, make these payments to you. Now you get to go on vacation, do whatever you want to do, and you're going to make the same amount of money. Now we get the upside over, and we overpaid for it too. So they're going to make more money actually, but we have this 10-year time frame. We can hit the cash flow perspective what we want. And now we know in 10 years, okay, we didn't care that we overpaid by 200 grand on the front end because we got into it with so much less money down. It was worth it.
Right. You guys do this professionally. You're equipped with the skills, the systems, the people to stabilize this building. People that owned it before, it was as bad as things were, they were going to keep getting worse. They weren't going to get better. They needed to sell. And that's a lesson for anybody listening to this in any kind of sales, but especially real estate. Like it's not a zero-sum game. In fact, the best deals you generally get, both sides are going to win. Okay, you need the seller. Perfect example with that deal, Trevor. The seller might have a problem that you can solve or something like that. That's such a simple, you taught me that one too. That's such a simple conversation to have that, hey, this is how much you're making in rents right now. If you do a seller finance with me, I'll pay you the same. So you're going to get the exact same check every single month, but you're just not going to deal with any of the bullshit with, would you say stripper poles and counterfeit money and non-paying tenants. That's all gone, but you're going to get the exact same upside as before. So that's a great lesson to leave us with. Trevor, I won't keep you much longer, but yeah, before we let you go, you touched on your meetup, your podcast, the floor is yours. Anything you want to plug right now, tell people where to follow you, reach out with questions, buy deals, whatever, go for it.
You can THOW5 on Instagram, Vesta Solutions LLC on Instagram, all that stuff. You can find us, DM us. I think it'd be cool to talk about a few deals too. Like that's my favorite thing on podcasts. If you still got,
let's keep going. What's
couple lessons from deals. So I was going to talk about, so like sometimes when you're talking to a seller, you give them the perfect scenario of what you think is best for them, but like they are still deciding and not always making the best decision. So for example, these guys had this 42 unit on market for like a year. I was trying to buy this thing for a while. I was offering terms, seller carries, all this stuff. Came down to like they just hated owning real estate and wanted all cash. So I was offering them like $4 to $4.5 million with some terms. They stay in the deal, collect some interest, maybe partner with us, do all this stuff. They end up taking $3 million cash on the deal. They pass up on $1.5 million over time. And I'm like, guys, like, I feel bad. Like, I want you to like make more. Like, this is a better deal for you if I were in you, and they just don't care. So, like, we buy a 40, it's like 80 something a door. It's worth $6.5 million once we go put $1 million into it and finish the rehab of the property. So, like, when you're talking to these sellers, like, I do try to make it win-win, but it comes down to like, what do they actually want? Can I give it to them? And how do I still pencil it? So I was like pitching this thing for like a year. No one else wanted to buy this thing. And they're eventually just done with it by that time. And we see that like all the time. So like we've chased deals. Like we have one deal, for example, Dane, first deal he was ever brokering. It was a most expensive thing we are going to buy price per door. It was like $272 a door or something in Portland for like 11 units, for like $3 million or something like that. These dudes, like financing falls apart during COVID. Banks aren't financing anything. And like we've been chasing the deal now for like 2.5 years. And I think we're finally going to get to buy it with the same exact terms we just started with, because they just came to grips of like, oh, I am trying to sell this for too much and I don't want to deal with it anymore. So there's like, you'll see that all the time. And that's what we tell people when they're looking at deals. It's like, just keep checking in on them. Like half the time you'll eventually be able to buy it if it's still sitting there.
That's another thing I've had to learn from you guys in the multi space is because my whole background was like acquisitions, foreclosures. Like my background was working the phone, and it's like, how quickly can we get this thing closed? Yeah. And what you start to learn is like, I'm the one you just mentioned, the 11 unit is a perfect example. Like we're the best offer on this. If someone comes along and offers more, like more power to them. But this is our offer, and we can just stick at that number. And it might come back in 3 months. It might come back in 2 years. So that's these people, you just keep following up, and these are much harder transactions to put together too. They're 4-month closes. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with financing, inspection. They're used to having deals fall apart. And you might catch it. That's another thing, right, Trevor? You might catch them right after they went into escrow and had a deal fall apart. You can come in and be kind of the white knight, like, okay, you tried it with those guys. We're pros. Yeah. Here's our portfolio. We've closed on 10 deals this year. You want to do this for real now?
Yeah, let's talk about this 42 unit, because it has a lot of these examples in it. We'll tell people like this is a real deal, so they see numbers. So like that 42 unit, for example, they went under contract before us, and then the dude went and inspected the property and tried to drop their price by like another $1 million. So we're coming in and telling them like, hey man, we are not going to retrade you. This price works. Here's my exact numbers. Why? I'm going to go spend $1 million. It's going to be worth 6.5. You can participate in this or not. That's completely up to you. We're happy either way. So we buy this thing, 42 units for whatever per door. It's renting from like 600 to 900 per unit. And this is majority 2x1s. So we come in and we go walk the whole property, get the reno budget. And we realize like I underwrote it actually being able to take the rents to $1,300. After we started renting out, we started taking the rents to $1,600 per year.
Where is this one?
This is in Astoria, Oregon, so on the coast. So it's like an army barrack style, kind of funky property. But how we actually financed it is we came in with a construction to bridge loan on 5-year debt. So the first 2 years are at a higher interest rate. We had to bring $1 million down. We partnered with a guy where we brought $250, he brought $750. The deal was insane for him. Like, we ran out of time and started raising late on it. So this was a big lesson learned. We gave him, I think, 15% return on his dollars he personally invested. We have none on ours. And then he also owned 50% of the deal. So we have an earn. Yeah. So he's going to make an insane money on it, like insane. And like a lot of people didn't want to do this deal too. They liked like the new construction and the stuff that looks nicer, but like the math of this deal, so much better than any deal. Like, other deal, which is insane.
Just do that on the aesthetics either, because they don't like how it looks, or they'll just be like, oh, it's on this street. That street sucks. And I'm like, I didn't even tell you what the price is yet or what the rents
Yes.
are. It doesn't matter. It could be free. And they're just like, one time I bought a house in that, or one time I got my car broken into in that neighborhood, and their mind shuts off.
Dude. Yeah. So this dude though, like 15% return on his dollars invested and owns 50% of the deal. We set up a construction to perm loan where you get to earn out within those first 2 years all the dollars invested into the deal, and they'll stabilize it at like I can't remember 6.5% rate, whatever it was. Plus, you can potentially pull out more money. So he'll get all his money out within probably like 16 to 24 months. We're like 9 months ish in now and just under budget on schedule. So we'll get all that money out with 15% return on those dollars, and then still own half the deal and have no money into the deal.
That's insane. But I assume you guys are going to do fine on it too, right?
Yeah, it's a good deal for us still. Like, had we like better deal would have not been giving that much away, but we put ourselves in a position where we waited too long, and we're like, we have to do this deal. Like, one, for our reputation, we got to close deals, and two, this is just this is one of the best deals we've done recently.
Well, this guy, I don't know him. Maybe this guy's, a big player too. And he goes, oh man, I had a great first experience with these guys. I want to buy more deals with them too. That's the long-term piece of it.
The goal is like, yes, he'll roll his money forward, do more with us, / trust us more. So now it's lower risk for him potentially because he's seen what we do. So he'll give us a better deal maybe. It was also interesting.
As long as he doesn't think he's getting the same terms on every single deal.
Yeah. Yeah, because one part was cool. This part was actually super cool because this was not the first deal I raised my own, but this is like the first deal where I've it was a bigger chunk essentially. Like, I've partnered with people who brought money before and done some, but this was like the biggest, most legit with a person I didn't really know. So he was actually for the California State Pension Fund or something, worked on this real estate board, like picking operators of deals with billions of dollars. And we were like, that is pretty sick. So we were just curious, asking him questions about what that was like. But he picked us as operators, showing up there at like, I'm 27 at that time, Dane's 25, and Mark's like 30, right? So just these young dudes coming in there, and he's like, yeah, I'll give you guys $750,000 or $1 million after he's seen all of those deals operate and like been placing all those dollars. So that was cool just to be like, oh, we presented this well, like this was good. Like, to be able to pitch a guy like this to get him to like it. Granted, we gave him 15% on his main plus half the deal, but it was still cool that he was like, yeah, I trust these guys with this large sum of money to do this.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Did you do that as you just formed an LLC with him, or was that part of a syndication?
Yeah, so that was just a joint venture. So he has operating decisions and he can make this and do certain things within it. But we did LLC, and then each of us had LLCs that were under that LLC. So we did a single asset LLC for that specific project.
Cool, man. Any other? I cut you off there. We almost didn't talk about deals. Anything else you want to touch on before we let you?
No, I could talk about deals all day, but we're at like an hour 20, so we'll put people to sleep. But yeah, if people like this, we do a podcast. Matt came on it too. You can check it out, called Deal Junkies Real Estate Podcast, on all platforms. We have dudes like Matt come on, and we do this same thing you're doing, basically ask people how they're doing their deals, what they're doing in their life, with the goal of being like, you guys can take information from this and hopefully do more deals yourself, because like, this is how I learned, so like, we want to pay it forward.
Cool, man. Well, thank you, Trevor, for being generous with your time, and also just being generous in general. You've helped a lot of people out with what you guys are doing, and it's really cool to watch. So great having you on as our second guest ever. We'll have you back sometime. Maybe
vote for Be Better Than Mike and tell Mike about it.
Yeah, we'll post a poll on the Instagram or something to see who's better. But yeah, man, great talking with you, and I'll see you next week when I'm in Oregon. Right? You coming to the walkthrough or to the inspection?
Yeah. Let me know the dates and times. But yeah, I'm planning on being.
You're like, yeah, but I don't know what it is. All right, man. I'll text you. Thanks.
Sweet. All right.